Hi friends, in today's video I am going to explain the poem Fidelity composed by William Wordsworth. For those of you who are new here, this is Mehjabeen. A barking sound the shepherd hears, a cry as of a dog or fox. So the poet begins the poem by talking about a shepherd who is walking along the mountainous area and suddenly he hears the cry of a dog or a fox. He is not sure what animal it is, but he gets to hear that sound. He halts, and when he hears the sound, he stops moving and searches with his eyes and then looks around him among the scattered rocks, and now at distance can discern. And as he looks around him, around him and takes a look at the rocks, at a distance he can see, discern means to see, a stirring. That means he can see a movement in a brake of fern. So among some ferns he can see a movement. In a brake means in a hole. And instantly a dog is seen, and that very next moment he can see a dog glancing from that covert green. So from that thicket, from that covert, that means from its hiding place in that thicket, he can see a dog, and this is the dog which is barking. The dog is not of mountain breed, and then the shepherd also can figure out that the dog is not a local of that area. It is not a breed of the mountains. Its motions too are wild and shy, and the dog looks, the motions of the dog give the idea that the dog is nervous, and at the same time the dog is excited with something, as the shepherd thinks, unusual in its cry. And then there is something very strange about the way it is crying. This is what the shepherd thinks. Nor is there anyone inside. The shepherd looks around to see if there is any human being around, maybe a master or maybe an owner of the dog, but he can see that nobody is there. Nor is there anyone inside, all round in hollow or in height. He cannot see any human being either below in the hollow of the mountains and nor in the highest part of the mountains. Nor shout, and he cannot hear any shout also, nor whistle strikes his ear, and he cannot hear anybody whistling at the dog. What is the creature doing here? And the shepherd cannot help wondering. The shepherd wonders, what is this animal, this dog, doing here in the middle of this wilderness? It was a cove. It was a cove means a small sheltered bay, a huge recess. Recess means a cleft or a hole that keeps till June, December snow. So it's a very cold area. The snow which starts pouring in the winter season, it is so cold that the snow does not melt even in the peak of summer. A lofty means grand, a lofty precipice in front. Precipice means a cliff, a majestic cliff in the front, and the shepherd can also see a silent tarn, that means a lake below. Far in the bosom of Helvellyn. So Helvellyn is a broad plateau, and it's a mountainous area in the Lake District of England. So far in the bosom, in the lap of Helvellyn, remote from public road or dwelling, and it is very far away from public roads or houses, pathway or cultivated land. So there is no roadway in that area, there is no cultivated land, there is no farm, no vegetation growing from trace of human foot or hand, and no human foot has seems to have trodden in that remote area, and nobody seems to have visited there. Here sometimes does a leaping fish Occasionally, the shepherd can see a fish jumping out, send through a tarn a lovely cheer, and the fish jumps out of the lake, of the waters of the lake, and that gives a moment of happiness to the beholder, especially to the shepherd. The crags repeat the raven's croak. The raven is a kind of crow. It's a big sized crow, and the raven keeps hovering around in the sky. And the crags, that means the rocky mountains, they also create some kind of sound, and the sound of the crags and the sound of the raven, they mingle, they blend and create a somber note, a somber music. Thither the rainbow comes, and then the shepherd sees a rainbow in the sky, the cloud and mist that spread the flying shroud. He can also see high up, it's very high up in the mountains, that is where the shepherd has visited, and he can see the clouds and he can see the mist as well, and they they blend and they create a shroud. The sunbeams and the sounding blast that if it could would hurry past, and the rays of the sun and the sounding blast and the wind, these that if could would hurry past, but that enormous barrier binds it fast. But the enormous, that means the huge wall of the mountains, it acts as a barrier, and as a result the rays of the sun as well as the blast of the wind cannot cross that mountain. Not free from boding thoughts a while, now the shepherd starts thinking. He thinks deeply. The shepherd stood and he was deep in his thoughts, and in this way he keeps on standing there reflecting on the situation, then makes his way, and then he starts moving towards the dog over rocks and stones as quickly as he may. And he can sense that the dog is trying to send out a signal, and so he tries to reach the dog quickly by crossing the rocks and the stones. Not far had gone before he found, and he does not have to move quite far when he comes upon a human skeleton on the ground. He can see human remains on the ground. The appalled discoverer, that means the shepherd, who is astounded. Appalled means astounded. The appalled discoverer, with a sigh, he lets out a sigh because of his astonishment. He looks around to learn the history. He looks around him one more time to try to understand what was actually happening. What were the circumstances under which this man seemed to have died. From these abrupt and perilous rocks and from these dangerous locations, the man had fallen. That is, the owner of the dog, he had fallen, that place of fear, and it was a fearful place, it was a frightening place from which he had fallen. At length upon the shepherd's mind it breaks and all is clear. The shepherd considers the situation, he thinks about it very deeply, and then all of a sudden everything becomes clear to him. He can understand things better now. He instantly recalled the name. He instantly remembered the name of the person who had crossed that area several months earlier. He had heard the news about a particular person who must have come to this area, and he remembers him and who he was. He knows the person and whence he came, and when he had come to this area, he also remembers the date, remembered too the very day on which the traveler passed this way. He remembers the day on which that particular traveler who had crossed this area. But hear a wonder for whose sake this lamentable tale I tell. So the poet says that he is narrating this sad story because of a very inspiring situation related to the dog. But hear a wonder for whose sake this lamentable tale I tell. So the poet says that he has a particular reason why he is conveying this story to his readers. a lasting monument of words. So he says that he is composing this poem as a tribute to the dog, and it is in he wants it to be a kind of monument of words. With this wonder merits well, and he says that dog is so wonderful, it is such an inspiration that his story deserves to be written about. The dog which still was hovering nigh, and the dog which belonged to that dead man, that dog was still hovering nigh, means he was hovering nearby, he was loitering nearby, repeating the same timid cry, and even now at this moment he was still crying continuously, he was wailing. This dog had been through 3 months' space a dweller in that savage place. So it was a very cold area, there was no shelter, and the dog did not have any food to eat, but still it hung around because its owner had fallen, and he had died in such a way that he had not been acknowledged in his death, he had not been given any decent burial, nobody had found his body, and this is the reason why the dog had stood there guarding the dead body of its owner. This dog had been through 3 months' space. So the incident of that man having gone missing, the owner had this incident happened 3 months earlier, but for the following 3 months the dog continued to stay in that particular place, a dweller in that savage place. So the dog dwelled in that savage area, in that wilderness, for 3 months. Yes, proof was plain that since the day on which the traveler had died. So the poet also says that there was sufficient proof about the fact that since the day the traveler had died, the dog had watched about the spot. So the dog had guarded the spot, or by his master's side. How nourished here such a long time, he knows who gave that love sublime. And then the poet also says that the dog, he was nourished by the love of his master, and because of which, even though he knew that his master was no more alive, he was still loyal, he was still fidel, he was still faithful to his master, because of the intense affections that the master had for him in his lifetime, and had taken care of him. So how nourished here such long time, he knows who gave that love sublime, and gave that strength of feeling great above all human estimate. So this kind of bonding that this animal, that the dog, had for his master, this kind of duty, this sense of duty, this sense of service, this sense of belonging, this sense of commitment that the dog had for its master, it is something which humans cannot understand. It crosses all definitions, and that is why the poet has been inspired to write this poem, to immortalize the beautiful nature, the character of the devoted dog. With this, I come to the end of this explanation. I have made separate videos on a summary and question and answers related to the poem Fidelity. Please check them out, and until the next time we meet again, bye.